I don't like Starbucks that much anymore. I mean, like, it's still really good. But Caribou is
Caribou better. I like Caribou.
delicious. Like,
I just
Okay,
never
here we
know what
go.
to order at Caribou. Like I know what
The
to
campfire
thing.
So, just as a reminder, all the keys have been completed, supposedly, by you. 1 week from today.
No.
Although I do think that probably be able to attack SA Friday.
I'm excited.
I think.
It was supposed to be this Wednesday.
Start it Friday.
So you could start attacking your SA Friday, but 1 week from today, we attack the Unit 5 exams in Ernesto.
Oh, God.
Okay. 3 slides, and then prep for a debate tomorrow. I know some of you won't be here. What company is PowerPoint, Excel, and
Microsoft?
I'm halfway done with the question and you just took it away.
Yeah, I had to read it out loud. I didn't know what the answer was, but then
Anyway, I understand some of you won't be here tomorrow. That's all right. We'll figure out how you can make it up.
Wait, we wasn't gonna be here tomorrow. Then it wasn't a big deal.
Ensemble.
You still have to make it up. Yeah. My fingers
So-
still throbbing.
Where we left off last week was the U.S. is all in on World War II. All those steps preparing for our total involvement. And remember, our strategy was containment of Japan, deal with Germany, and then after dealing with Germany, focus on Japan. Can you put that away now?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, if you're going to fight a war, you need soldiers, you need men, you need infrastructure, you need weapons. And so let's spend a moment talking about how the U.S. beefed up its war machine for World War II. Similar to World War I. Do you remember how the U.S. beefed up during World War I? Anyone want to, how that happened? How did the U.S. make sure there were enough tanks and enough planes and enough?
That rule.
They required large
Very good. So basically, the government stepped in and
thinking
said,
about-
stop building cars
I
and
went let
start
other people-
building tanks. It's the same thing for World War II. You were looking at some of the largest warplanes ever created. And it was production of the war machine was put under a government agency called the War Production Board. This agency, answerable only to the president, basically had the authority to tell American companies, we need a submarine, we need aircraft carrier, we need tanks, we need guns, and so the American manufacturing arm focuses on the war machine, right? So we're going to stop making cars and stuff for the American public. We're going to focus on making war machines for the U.S. government. And as a result, supply goes down for regular stuff, right? They're not making it stuff. So if you have ancestors who were still around during World War II, ask them about if they remember the rationing that went on, about how you were supposed to have meatless Wednesdays and other days of the week, just to make sure that there was enough stuff for the boys over fighting in Europe and in Asia. To make sure, because we have a basic understanding of economics in here, if the supply goes down for something, what supposedly happens to the prices of that stuff?
Goes up.
It goes up. And we don't want, the United States government does not want that to happen. And so creates a secondary board, the Office of Price Administration. This agency had the authority to tell companies, you will not raise your prices because supply went down. Today, why did this tie cost $4? Why did this tie cost $4?
It costs $3
Nice tie.
to make.
Because they thought that somebody would buy it for $4. That's capitalism, right? The reason you buy anything and it is the price it is because the company thought someone's going to buy it for that price. And if no one's buying it, they'll put it on sale. And if lots of people buying it, they might even jack the price up because they believe demand is high enough that they can adjust the price. Now government is doing it for you. Well, you and I call that, when government tells companies what to charge, socialism, right? Which is kind of crazy. But remember, during a war, government can sort of give itself authority to do things that it would otherwise not do. What better time to go on strike than during a war? Think about it. I mean, the government needs tanks. And you work in the tank factory and you don't think you're getting paid enough. You got them. You've got that. They'll meet your demands. Or you'll go on strike. To make sure that strikes were minimal, the government created a third agency, the War Labor Board, to make sure that workers didn't go on strike. Not that they couldn't go on strike, but they acted as a mediator, right? A group that isn't happy with their pay, is kind of grumbling and they're organizing, call the War Labor Board and let them be the mediator, the go-between between you and the owners of the company. They'll see if we can work something out here. Okay? Kind of smart, actually. Of course, what if you went on strike anyway? Well, let's forbid it. So let's pass a law saying no strikes. Now, does that violate your right as a worker to go on strike?
First Amendment.
Well, maybe. Does it violate your right?
Not in times of crisis.
Not in times of crisis, exactly. Yes, it certainly does. Too bad. Too bad it violates your rights. Worry about that after we've defeated the Nazis. And to make sure that certain vital industries are continually available, fuel, for example, coal, railroads, they were nationalized. Big word. What does it mean? Government took it over, right? Now, this was a temporary measure. Government took over coal mines, railroads. After the war, they relinquished control. Okay? This is a lot of government. This is liberal government. This would be in that test called liberal or conservative, because this is a lot of government. Questions?
Tomorrow's Avery's birthday.
Ready?
Riley's birthday.
Ready? Okay. So I've talked about this idea a couple times, and that is this. It is during wars when you see rights get taken away and rights given. It was during a war when women were put to work and recognized as, gee, they can contribute to society. Maybe we should make that permanent. And yet it's during a war when your right to strike is taken away. So giveth and taketh. Will giveth certain rights and will taketh certain rights. It happens during wars. Let's look at 3 specific examples. The role of women. Anyone recognize her? That's Rosie the Riveter. Very good. What's a riveter?
Man.
I really don't know. I assume there's a tool involved and you rivet, right? Riveting is when you rivet.
Yes.
There, that's clear. Anyway, the men are off fighting. Who's running the factories? Who's building the planes? Who's building the submarines? The women.
Rosie the River.
Rosie the Riveter. You got it. This slide represents the plight of African Americans during World War II. Have any of you ever heard of this thing called the Great Migration North? What was it?
So basically, like African Americans moved north to like be in all the factories.
Very good, right? So the Jim Crow's getting old, segregation's getting old in southern states. A bunch of African Americans said, screw this, we're out of here, migrated north. Now, it's not like they were welcomed with open arms. It's not like the Irish said, great, competition, super. But there's no legal segregation in northern states. There certainly was segregation. not legally, but there certainly was. Okay, and so how's the government going to deal with making sure that African Americans working in factories are treated fairly? So again, government steps in. Government steps in and makes sure, at least to the naked eye, at least it looks like we're going to make sure African Americans are treated fairly with another agency, the Fair Employment Practices Commission, or FEPC. There it is, Fair Employment Practices Commission. This is the government agency that if you were an African American, you could go to and say, I'm not being treated fairly, I'm being paid less than my fellow workers, blah, 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 blah. And they might address your concerns, maybe. Okay. It is, again, just sort of interesting that I would argue, and then with the last one, Native Americans, I would argue that look what the U.S. is doing versus what the Nazis are doing. Okay, right? Think about at this time, this is 1940s, what are the Nazis doing with their minority populations that they're dealing with? What are the Japanese doing with their minority populations? Not this, is what we'll all agree, right? I could show you a similar map in Europe, only these camps are concentration camps and death camps, right? These are certainly locations. Well, what were they? Various Native American tribes of what are called the code talkers. Anyone ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Can anyone share? Go ahead.
Talked in code.
Well, Native American languages are Native American. No other place in the world has them. So, I mean, people like the Japanese and the Nazis don't know what they have no way to decipher what they mean. So we used them to send messages. And the code talkers were the Native Americans who went and told and translated those messages.
Very good, right? So if I'm at point A, I need to get a message to point B. I just tell my Native American code talker. He then translates it into his native language through the radio to another Native American on the other side who hears it and just says, yeah, they want you to go over there. And the Japanese are listening in. They had not a clue what was being said. What is this? There's no common lettering. The rules of phonics aren't the same. They had not a clue. And we cracked their code. The United States cracked, along with the British, cracked the German code. We knew exactly where they were going. They never cracked our code. And what was it? The Cherokee language. Not a clue, right? Huge advantage for us. Okay. So we have the code talkers who were welcomed into the military, although segregated. Desegregation of the U.S. military did not occur until after World War II, right? So there still were all black units and Native American units, okay? The last note on this slide is something called Executive Order 8802. If you were a factory and you were making military stuff, you were not allowed to discriminate against minority, right? If you had a contract with the U.S. government, no discrimination allowed. Okay. So once again, what we see here is helping groups during World War II at the same time as your right to privacy is being taken away, as your right to pricing. I know that's weird, but if any of you plan on being your own business owner someday, this is a weird right, and you won't find it specifically in the Constitution, but you have the right to charge whatever you want. If there's a moron out there who's going to pay, charge them it. Go ahead. Good luck. But not during a war. So that right's taken away from you. Remember what Rockefeller used to do? We talked about this, right? Rockefeller would make his prices, frowns upon that. So to a certain degree, right? No right is absolute. I hope you've learned this by now. No right is absolute. You do not get to open that door and scream fire. And then when arrested, say, free speech, First Amendment. No, that is not free speech. That is not First Amendment. You do not get to go to Miss Donnelly's office and say, Mr. Potter's selling drugs again in the parking lot. First of all, prove it. What do you mean again? And no, I wasn't. And that's not free speech. You're lying. and there's no proof. Okay. Any questions here? Very good. Last slide. Last slide for today. So tomorrow we debate, and really after the debate, I don't want to really necessarily cover too much. So we're about to fight the American role in WW2, but I just want to set the stage of, all right, what's the situation in the Pacific when the U.S. decides to engage the Nazis over there in Europe? Okay, so the extent of the Japanese Empire is this goldish line here. You can see that they've conquered parts of China, French Indochina, the Philippines, taken away from Americans. MacArthur was famously heard saying, anyone remember?
I'll be back.
Basically, I'll be back. He said, I shall return. I shall terminate it, right? And fled. And then various other Asian things. So on the best day, the extent of the Japanese Empire, what's the American strategy? Well, that's step 3, right? Step 1 is keep them where they are. Just keep them contained where they are right now. Okay, don't let them extend any further. Basically, set up a defensive perimeter. Don't engage them. Don't re-invade. Don't start taking away what they've already captured. Just prevent them from capturing any more. Okay. From there, they will engage in. These are kind of interchangeable terms. Something called leapfrogging or island hopping. Anyone want to explain it? You must know it. Go ahead.
Take one island, capture it, kind of contain it, get everything off, or like make it your kind of place, then go to another one and do the same thing over next after next.
Okay, so my question to you then, Soren, is this. Let's say that each one of you is right, I'm the American Navy, and the front desk is the Japanese mainland. All of you are islands in the Pacific, and each one of you is a Japanese military unit of some sort. There's the mainland. That's the Japanese mainland, and I am the U.S. Navy. Do I reconquer all of you?
Just
Go straight through.
Yep. I'll get her, and then him, and then her, and then I don't care about you. Who cares about you? It doesn't matter. All I want is that. In order to get that, I don't need him or her or her. You're insignificant. Just get so that planes can fly to Japan, bomb them, and return to wherever it is they took off with one fuel tank. Okay? A fuel tank is about this far on this map. A fuel tank, round trip. Okay? You got to get to Japan. Oh, look at this thing called Iwo Jima. That is a very important island. Now you know why. Why do you need Iwo Jima?
Bombs.
So that you can bomb Japan. Well, you got to get to Iwo Jima. So you got to capture Guam, maybe. And then you got to capture. See, you just got to get to where the planes can fly, land, refuel, fly, land, refuel, fly, land, fly, bomb, fly back. That's called leapfrogging or island hopping. You don't need all of it. Just connect the dots. La 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 la. Connect the dots. La 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 la. Okay, and as a reminder, you've seen all this before, but let's just remind you what? The Japanese attacked China for the metal. The Japanese attacked Indochina for other natural resources necessary to create the Japanese war machine, like rubber, tin, whatever. They're also liberating their fellow Asians. That is definitely a factor as well. They're going to attack the Dutch East Indies for the oil. They're going to attack Pearl Harbor to stop the Americans from stopping the Japanese. If I think you're going to stop me, I'm going to stop you first.
Wait, can you start by with the middle?
A
Manchuria.
preemptive strike.
Manchuria is the middle.
Yeah, really good.
China for the metal. French Indochina for other natural resources. By the way, also liberate our fellow Asians. Goes without saying.
This is what Japan did?
Yep. Dutch East Indies for the oil. preemptive strike against the Americans. There's one thing on here still there. And
Oh.
I would consider this for your Blue Book essay. How many of you have ever heard of the Bataan Death March besides our two who've heard everything about every single thing in World War II? Do any of the rest of you ever heard of the Bataan Death March? Okay, which one of you two wants to show off your brilliant knowledge? Which I'm not being sarcastic. Your time to shine. Jack, what was the Bataan Death March?
So basically,
Of course he did.
there's the Japanese went and took the Philippines, right? And there was a bunch of American and Filipino soldiers on the Philippines, right? And the Japanese don't treat soldiers very nice. They're
Right?
really mean to their soldiers. And well, to their prisoners. I'm sorry. And so they took them on this death march, right? And a lot of these prisoners died from the Philippines and the American prisoners of war, because the Japanese don't believe in surrender, right? So surrendering, which is what we did, was the most dishonorable thing. So they sent them on these impossible missions like the Bataan Death March to get them from one place to another. And if they died all along the way, so what?
Very good. Right. So a cruel
Oh,
march about 60 miles. So about the distance from here to Eau Claire on foot. Forced marches, and American and Filipino soldier prisoners of war being marched on foot. And if you took a break, if you fell, the Japanese would simply finish the job right then and there. Right? Pretty cruel. Pretty cruel. Was the U.S. justified in bombing Japan with atomic weapons? You could argue, yeah. Look at the criminal way that the Japanese were treating their prisoners of war. The United States, by and large, I mean, were there rogue Americans who tortured Japanese or German prisoners of war? Sure, but that was not the policy. It was not the policy. There was this is weird. There was a German prisoner of war camp in the town I grew up. I grew up in Faribault, Minnesota. So they were flown to Faribault, Minnesota, and put in a prison camp there. There were no extermination camps in Minnesota, as far as I know, right? No torture, no ovens. There was no final solution going on. Go ahead. Yes, you are identifying a possible rebuttal. Yep, that's fine. Or you're not. Right? And again, the internment camps. It's not pleasant. People didn't say, where should we go for vacation? Say, there's an internment camp in Idaho. Beautiful. No, but not exactly Bataan Death March level. Okay. So it's really up to you. Those planes that I showed you on the previous slide, the B-29, bad mofo. That is a bad plane. When I say bad, I mean good, but bad for the Japanese. Real bad. These are big honking planes that dropped lots of ordnance on the Japanese. Go ahead.
I think from picture 4 that
B-20, of course.
Of course it does.
I'm not insulted. Okay, so big old planes, right? The American war machine, very impressive. Very good.
Like if they had like need a full tank to get that far, or were they just carrying a bunch of bombs which made the economy less efficient?
Yes, exactly right. You got it.
I was gonna say we fly.
Oh, you're smart.
I don't think that's true during World War II. That the Americans had a plane that was able to fly across the Pacific.
Like, why would I take?
I mean, maybe, but almost. Oh, today. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, today. Yes. But in fact, today, maybe you've seen this, but today the United States has the capability of refueling during flight, which is pretty cool, right? But no, back then you need islands on the way. Very good. I have nothing further as far as content is concerned. There's a debate tomorrow So maybe if you're on a team and you don't know what you're doing, you should find somebody else on your team and learn. Some of you still haven't done your Kias. Evidence, synthesis quote. Off you go. There are the computers right back
Allison, are
there.
you pulling on something?
Dokily, dokily. Rest of the hour's yours. Can I say that?
Ah, can we do to fix my problem for tomorrow? What do I have to do to make it?
I don't know.